I knew you guys were for real in fighting against the establishment when I started going on right-wing shows and I would say something negative about Mitch McConnell. And when I did that in the past, what I would get back is, oh, no, Mitch McConnell's great. Pelosi's terrible, but Mitch McConnell's great.
Let's do that here. What do you guys think of Mitch McConnell?
All right. Yes, I love that. So look, for my left-wing friends that are watching out there, they just booed Mitch McConnell. That's a great thing, okay? And let's do one more. What do you guys think about Dick Cheney? My left-wing friends out there, we have been waiting for the right-wing populists to boo Mitch McConnell and Dick Cheney our whole lives. Take the win. Take the win.
I'm joined now by founder of TYT and host of The Young Turks, Cenk Uygur. Cenk, thank you so much for joining. That was a clip of you at an unlikely event this past weekend, Amfest, sponsored by Turning Point USA. So not exactly a liberal bastion there, but I wanted to talk about this event in particular because you've taken a lot of heat for going in the first place, and I want to push back against that right off the bat, because I do think if this election has shown us anything, is that Democrats do have to be willing to go into spaces that are more hostile to Democrats. Inherently, if we're going to look at expanding our coalition, expanding our tent, we have to go outside of that tent to be able to do that. So I disagree with people who think that you shouldn't be going there. I think we should be going into the most dangerous territory that we could. That's the only way that we're going to be able to really send our message the farthest. But I do take issue with one thing there. You said in that clip, I knew you guys were for real about fighting the establishment, and you give a bunch of a list of reasons, but you said it to a room full of people who voted for a billionaire in Donald Trump and who was funded by the literal richest guy in the world, in Elon Musk. So I understand and appreciate your argument that Kamala Harris and the Democrats are to establishment. That's a drum that you've beaten for years now, but isn't it insane to think that this Republican Party, this MAGA Republican Party, is the answer? Like there are more billionaires in Trump's cabinet than the buffet line at Davos.
Yeah. So let's take both of those real quick. So number one, I'm going to talk to folks. There's a talking point that we have on the left that we don't realize is absurd, but it is totally absurd. They say, well, if you go talk to them, it legitimizes them. You know what legitimizes them? Winning the election.
Right. I mean, that ship has sailed, right? Like when people say don't go on Fox, as if millions of as if we're the reason that Fox is suddenly going to be legitimized because on a network that millions of people watch on a daily basis.
Of course. And so and they even won the popular vote. But the fact that they won the popular vote is very relevant because we have to win those voters back. And you can't win those voters back if you're not talking to them. So that's point one. Now, on in terms of the establishment, this one is a complicated and really interesting topic. So both sides claim that the other side is bad and their donors suck, but our donors are great. And I always find that conversation intensely absurd, right? So if you say to me the donors on both sides are bad, meaning like not that they're bad people, but that it's bad that this system allows for those kind of donations, which then obviously influence both sides. I say absolutely, 100%. So, but that means you've got to be honest about your own side. So you, as you pointed out, I've been saying this for about 20 years now. And so that's why I'm in the Bernie Sanders wing. And I think when Kamala Harris was bragging about how she had 90 corporate CEOs on her side, that was a terrible strategy. And when, she raised over $1 billion herself, let alone the billions in the PACs, largely a huge portion of that was corporate donors. If you think that they don't have to pay them back with favors, you're just not paying attention. I love you, brothers and sisters, but this is the same exact thing I say to the right wing. So when I go there and I say, one thing they did that we didn't do yet is they did a revolt against their establishment wing within the party. So they, basically kicked out Mitch McConnell from power, etc. We have not done likewise. We have not kicked out the Nancy Pelosi's and the Joe Bidens. And so when you go to do that, there's massive pushback, okay? No way, those are our leaders, and the other side is so evil. We have to take the money, we have to bow our heads to these leaders, and we have to let them serve the donors. No, I don't agree, right? But now when you turn to the right wing, I said later in that speech, I said, guys, don't, lower your guard. because you have donors too. And then there was a little bit of a hush over the crowd, right? Because when you start talking about Republican donors, who pops to mind first? Elon Musk. And so I'm honest about it in both directions, and I say it to their face. And so I've gone on other right-wing shows and said, who's Elon, what's Elon Musk? He's a donor. He's the largest donor, over $250 million that he gave to Donald Trump. And now all of a sudden he wants regulatory agencies that regulate his companies to be wiped away from existence.
Right.
Well, that's awfully convenient, right? And then who's his donor? Third largest donor, Miriam Adelson, $137 million. If you take the Adelson family, Sheldon and Miriam, Sheldon's passed away, but before he did, they've given over $330 million to Donald Trump, even larger than Elon Musk. And in my opinion, he's handed them foreign policy. So these are the points I make to right-wingers, and who else is even getting in the room to make those points, to tell not their leaders, but their voters, guys, remember, you're supposed to hate corruption. That's what you say 24/7. If you do, be careful about Elon Musk, Miriam Adelson, and every other donor that Trump has.
Well, I think that's where the point of contention is, because you saying this stuff is you operating in good faith. These people don't care. Like, there are no long-standing principles that they abide by. This is the purported party of family values, the purported party of the Constitution, of law and order, of states' rights, of fiscal responsibility. They will throw that shit out the window the moment, the millisecond it becomes inconvenient for them, and that's what they did. But you're saying these things to people as if they're operating under some principle that they should be against the establishment, that they should be against these donors, when they're not. The only longstanding principle is their allegiance to Trump. And so my worry is that, like, you trying to get through to them on these issues of principle is falling flat, because it's not principle that got them there in the first place. There is no longstanding principle when you are a Trump supporter.
Yeah. So, Brian, this is an interesting. I think this is probably the most interesting point of the conversation, because I think you're right and you're wrong. So the right part is what you're laying out the history of, and that is correct. That's what I've said, that's what you've said, and we've been accurate about that, right? So did Donald Trump do anything actually populist in his first term? No. He even forgot about the wall until 6 months were left, and I got to run on the wall,
right.
So I'll pretend to build like 3 feet of it, right? And all he did was giant corporate tax cuts, which is literally the least populist thing you could do.
Right.
And I say that all the time, again, on right-wing shows. I talk to them about Jav Yas, how Trump wanted to ban TikTok. Yas gives him a couple $1 million. All of a sudden, he likes TikTok. Same thing on electric vehicles and Elon. And again, whenever I make those points, even the host nod along, it's uncomfortably true, right?
Yeah.
So now, so on family values, another point where you're absolutely right. Enormous hypocrisy, like record-breaking hypocrisy for my entire life. Family values for you, but not for me. But I'll vote for the guy with the porn star mistress, et cetera, right? So we're all clear on that, and there's nothing wrong with anything we've ever said on that. We've been 100% right. Okay, now where's the part where I think you're wrong? And this is the part where people, I think I'm a little ahead of people, and people think I'm being naive. So what I'm sensing, Brian, is from their audiences, and I'm not just sensing it like through intuition. They're literally doing polls while I'm on their shows. We're doing interactions, calls. When I went to Amfest, talked to literally hundreds of guys who are Maga, as they came up to talk to me, etc. And this is not the same base as Trump 2016. So that doesn't mean that they're angels. It doesn't mean that everyone on that side all of a sudden changed their mind. Will you find the immovable part of the Trump base as we had before? Absolutely, right? Will you still find some evangelical Christians? Yes, but they have greatly dwindled, both in size and power. So that family values stuff went out the door, partly because they were hypocrites, but partly because the evangelical Christians aren't in charge anymore of MAGA. So the rest of MAGA are kind of bros and stuff, and they don't really care about family values at all. In fact, a lot of the bros are pro-choice. So when you say that some people on the right or agree with us on things like pro-choice or anti-corruption, the pushback I get from the left is, no way, they're all evil, they're all a monolith, they're all this, they're all that. No, guys, that's unsophisticated. 77 million people are not all the same thing.
Right.
And remember, we don't have to win or care that much about the outer edge of MAGA on the right, You're never going to win those guys over, and that's not the issue. You've got to win over people on the inner edge that voted for Obama, that voted for Biden, and now have voted for Trump. And those folks are not radicals. Those folks need to be won over, and they are different than what the base was before. And so what I'm sensing is, on anti-war and anti-corruption, they really do mean it. Now, if you say yes, but they're backing Trump, who's doing this obvious brazen corruption we just talked about, I know. So what I'm doing is giving them an opportunity to remember that they're supposed to be anti-corruption, and that, hey, when Trump does favors for the donors, I'm the only one pointing out to them that that's hypocritical, right? Because remember, they're not watching mainstream media. They're not watching our shows, right? So, and their right-wing media hosts are not overly incentivized to point out Trump's hypocrisy.
Totally.
Yeah. So, like, for example, on anti-war, they're definitely anti-war. Definitely. They're not even hypocritical about it. And so if you don't believe me, I love you. It's okay. I get it. We've all been burned hundreds of times, right? But if it turns out I'm right, what I'm hoping people go, oh yeah, Cenk told us this. I remember yelling at him about it, but it turns out, holy cow, they are anti-war, right? On anti-corruption, I think that the instincts of some portion of their base are correct, but we've got to show them, without like ripping their face off, that maybe Trump is also corrupt.
I think the part that, and you touched on this, is the cognitive dissonance between these people purporting to say that they are for one thing and yet constantly reaffirming their support for Donald Trump, who stands in stark opposition to the very thing that they purport to be against. And so I guess my question for you is, what's your red line to the point where you finally recognize whether or not the people who you were talking to at Turning Point USA's Amfest, for example, are not actually operating in good faith, and whether there is, again, to my earlier question, no actual longstanding principle, it's other than fealty to the God King, right? Like I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out here, because thus far there has been no indication that, even though they say they're for anti-corruption, Donald Trump's the most corrupt guy to ever sit in the Oval Office, even though they say that they're, for the list goes on and on, right? It's the list that we have spoken about earlier. But when will you stop giving certain people at this event, for example, the benefit of the doubt in terms of their actions not matching up to their rhetoric?
Yeah. So I think some things are clear, right? So, for example, we're not going to win on a whole heap of issues, right? So, like, if I try to convince them that the crypto bros are going in the wrong direction, right, I'm going to get massive blowback, and I'm never going to win on that.
Correct. Okay.
So that's going to take 4 years and probably us getting robbed to the tune of a couple of $1 trillion before they realize that mistake. Okay. So I'm super realistic about all of these different things. I think that on corruption, they're never going to want to admit in the beginning that Trump is doing favors for their donors. Although, again, I see right-wing hosts and people in their audience going, I understand what you're saying about Jeff Yaz and TikTok. I understand what you're saying about electric vehicles and Elon. So that's the beginning, right? It's not the end. So then my best guess is the anti-war stuff is where the rubber hits the road. So he put in, and Brian, parts of your audience, parts of the left-wing hosts, etc., might not love this, but my sense is that the rubber's probably going to hit the road on Israel. And so here's why. Because Trump put in Marco Rubio, Elise Stefanik, Mike Huckabee, and Mike Walls as Team Miriam. That's his,
right.
The four people that he's handing foreign policy to. Miriam Adelson is a supporter of the hard right wing in Israel. And so they're going to push towards outrageous positions like annexing the West Bank, annexing northern Gaza. Israeli press has already written about this. Israeli cabinet ministers are already excited about this. If they try to annex, for example, the West Bank, it probably will lead to a vicious, bloody war. And then, but I don't know the contours of it. They might just slaughter the Palestinians again. And I'm not naive enough to think that MAGA is going to be like, oh my God, we're losing precious Palestinian and Muslim lives, right? No, but I think at some point they're going to say, look, guys, this is an America first. Why are we paying for another war of Israel? Why are we paying for another war of Israel, right?
Yeah.
So, And if they don't, though, and then they go, hey, you know what? I mean, now let's do an extreme example. If Trump helps Israel start a war with Iran and says we have to finance it, and they don't rebel, then I was totally wrong. And
I think I understand completely, and these are good examples, and it's good to have this sense of like where it could go in the future, and I think that's a realistic example as well. But I think what you are probably giving more credit than I will is this sense that any of this stuff matters, because again, there has been they haven't shown any discernment thus far on any of the things that they claimed were their principles before, and so I'm skeptical at best of this notion that they're going to move away from Donald Trump as soon as he enacts any policy that goes against the grain in terms of what these people claim that they wanted. But again, remains to be seen. I hope you're right. I hope that they do show some discerning behavior toward Donald Trump. I'm skeptical that they will, but I guess we're going to see in the coming months and years here. I want to pivot over to the state of the media right now. Now, you have been, you and the team over at TYT have been critical of the left. Certainly more critical of the left than the right is of the Republican Party, which, that's your prerogative. You're certainly more critical of the Democratic Party than I am. I think that I can learn more from you in terms of bolstering independent media bona fides by virtue of doing that more. And I also think that there's a time and a place to do it. But we are in a media environment right now where we often see that left-wing media kind of bolsters its progressive bona fides by criticizing the left. Right-wing media bolsters its conservative bona fides also by criticizing the left. And so given that massive disparity, especially in light of how it presented itself ahead of this election, where so many people are consuming independent media right now, and that informs so much of their political affiliation, and if it feels like the left is getting hit or the Democrats are getting hit from both sides, it really isn't that surprising then that the Democrats would turn in such a poor performance in this election. Again, if people are really gaining their knowledge from what they see on indie media, does that inform a little bit of how you're going to operate moving forward in this kind of new media environment with so many people kind of sprinting away from legacy media and coming toward independent media, and seeing how the asymmetry in that media ecosystem manifested itself in this election to the benefit of Republicans?
Yeah, so I disagree with one of the assumptions that you layered in there that's so important. I'll get to that in a second. So there's two parts of this conversation. Number one, we do a news show, so we're just going to be honest, period. So
right.
If the Democrats are doing something wrong, we're going to say it. We don't care when, we don't care where, we don't care if people go, no, that's not good marketing for the Democratic Party. That's not my business. That's not my job. My job is to be honest. So same with the Republicans. Oh, no, don't hurt Donald Trump's feelings. No, I'm going to hurt his feelings. I don't care. That's not my job, is to protect Kamala Harris or Donald Trump's feelings or their political career or either party. We're just going to do an honest news show. Young Turks Live, 6 o'clock Eastern. Check it out every day and you'll be amazed. Okay, so, and it's funny that that's like a unique thing in American media. Okay, now let's go to the core of what you're asking, though, in terms of strategy on the left and on the Democratic side.
And I asked this question that you're going to get into because, obviously you're a progressive and you want to see progressivism win out in the United States, as do I. And so it's not, this isn't, you're not Reuters, right? So that's why I asked. There is a sense of like, there is activism that you want to see happening. And so just wanted to like lay that out, but go on.
Yeah, I totally get it. And so to your point, Brian, so what we do on the Young Turks is we give you the facts first, and those are non-negotiable. Then we do perspective journalism, especially me, right? And so that's where I get into strategy and what's the best way for progressives and populists to win, et cetera, et cetera. So let's address that part of it now. So in my opinion, there's three wings of the Democratic Party. There's the establishment wing, there's the populist wing, and then there's what I call the far left wing. Right, and you can call that anything you like, and I'm not trying to be offensive about it. And in fact, in that Amfest discussion, I said, for example, I'm extreme left on gun control. I know that my positions would not win in America. They would be very normal in Europe, but in America, we have no chance of passing my gun control policies. Okay, so now between these three wings, the establishment wing is Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Pelosi, Clinton, etc. That has led to electoral disaster, and it has done it so with incredible haughtiness. They told us, no, Hillary Clinton is definitely going to win, and this riff-raff Bernie Sanders, nobody wants populism. Well, they were 100% wrong. 100% wrong. So, by the way, Bernie Sanders had a 12-point lead on Election Day in 2016. Obviously, the campaign would have changed that, but I'd much rather start with have a 12-point lead than lose as Hillary Clinton did. But Joe Biden barely won with 43,000 votes in 3 swing states in 2020, even though Trump was awful and he could barely beat him. And then obviously Kamala Harris not only lost every swing state, but the popular vote. So guys, you got to face reality. Like, there's what the world you want and the world as it actually exists. And the world as it actually exists despises this establishment. The right wing does, the left wing does, the middle does, the independents do. So if you keep going, well, look, we've got a new and improved corporate robot, Pete Buttigieg. He's going to go out there and he's going to be in a flannel jacket and he's going to have a populist script. It's never going to work. It's never going to work. America does not want someone who takes donor money, has pretty little talking points, and then does what the donors want. Okay? So please stop losing. Please, I'm begging you. If you don't want Trump, you don't want Maga in charge, stop going with the wrong strategy. So then you've got the far left, and they say, no, we should have maximalist positions. So on trans issues, I don't want a moderate position. Just give me everything. Give me everything. Everybody has to be called a birthing person. Everybody, change sex operations for people under 18 is fine. No, are you okay? They have to be forced. The professional sports leagues have to be forced to allow trans women, etc. Look, even if you think those maximalist positions are wonderful and exactly right and the most moral thing to do, America is not there. You have to win over America so that you can win elections with that strategy. Right now, if you go with my gun control policy or maximalist positions on crime, trans issues, etc., you're going to lose. So please, why are you handing elections to the right wing? I mean, people are yelling at me for talking to the right wing. I mean, the Democratic Party gave these elections. You should be furious at Democratic leadership for handing these elections to the right wing. So what's the part of the Democratic Party that I think is the most popular and the one that is actually the biggest component of the Democratic Party in the left wing is the populist wing. So that's higher minimum wage, paid family leave, Medicare for all, which is just universal health care that the entire world has, free college at the state level, for government state-run colleges like University of Texas, University of North Carolina. I can go on and on. But the economically populist positions we have that are enormously popular, you have to run on them. And then when you get into office, for God's sake, you have to do them. If you don't do them, you cede ground to the right and you seem hypocritical and you lose elections. So in my ideal world, we all coalesce around, obviously Bernie's too old, so someone along those lines, and that person wins the primary. And I promise to you that if that person wins the primary, we're going to just absolutely clean the Republicans' clock in the 2028 general election.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here and push back on something and say that Biden in the first 2 years of his term, when he had full control of government, was able to enact a lot of the populist agenda that you and I both wanted to see enacted. I mean, we're talking about, the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, capping medical out-of-pocket medical costs at $2,000, insulin and inhalers at $35, getting the rich to pay higher taxes. Infrastructure, the infrastructure bill, the gun safety bill, although of course it didn't go far enough for what you wanted, but the list goes on and on, right? And so eliminating junk fees at banks, getting automatic refunds for airline cancellations, a lot of what Lena Khan did at the FTC, blocking the Kroger-Albertsons merger, click to cancel, again, elimination of junk fees. So there was a lot that happened. And so I guess my question is, if there is only contempt for someone like Joe Biden, who was able to enact a lot of the populist agenda, then what incentive is there for somebody who comes along next to enact a populist agenda if there is so little applauding and so much criticism for what hadn't yet been done?
Yeah, I just fundamentally disagree on your view of what got done.
Well, no,
So,
I'm to be clear, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I mean, that's like,
no, I get it. I get
yeah,
it. So let me address it. So look, if you say Biden got more done than Obama did, for example, and Clinton's a very conservative Democrat these days, meaning like if when we look back at his policies from back
right,
then, they seem very conservative. Um, Yeah, I mean, but that's damning with faint praise. So
correct.
I said Obama got about 5% of his agenda done, and I think Biden got 15% of his agenda done. And for a Democrat, that's amazing. And if you're in the top 10% or you're relatively comfortable in this country, you look at it and you go, this guy got us 15% change. What else do you unreasonable people want, right? But if you're in the overwhelming majority of Americans that are struggling, half the country can't survive a $500 financial hit, then 15% isn't close to good enough. So, for example, on negotiating drug prices, did he negotiate them? Yeah, on insulin, literally one drug. And then by 2016, we can get all the way up to 10 drugs, right?
Yeah,
Which, what that does, guys, I hate to break your heart, but that's a trick that protects tens of thousands of drugs that we cannot negotiate drug prices on.
yeah, I
It's
agree with that.
yeah, it cements the drug companies' power while pretending to fight back against them. But on the other hand, there's good things that Biden did that are real. Like, so whenever somebody sends in a comment as we're doing the show live about, oh my God, I got student debt relief, I go, look, guys, he did about 10% of the student debt relief. So I want the whole thing. And so I'm going to push for that. But if you're in the 10% that got student debt relief, you got to vote for Joe Biden. I've said that dozens of times
Yeah,
on my show because if a politician delivers for you, you owe him the vote, right? He delivered for you. So the proof is always in the pudding. And so we ask way too little of our politicians, especially on the Democratic side. He didn't even introduce the public option. He didn't fight for paid family leave, 1%. It polls at 84%. What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? You know what's going to happen? If Trump is smart at all, he'll pass paid family leave because it's so popular with both the right and the left wing. And then people will go, well, why didn't Biden pass it? Because Biden didn't want to pass it. That's the part where I break the hearts of some Democratic voters who believe that our politicians are saints and good people. They're not. His donors don't want him to pass paid family leave. It would have been so easy to pass it. And he just absolutely refused to do it. And the parliamentarian and the filibuster are nothing but excuses. And you'll never hear about the parliamentarian when Trump's in charge. When he was president for 4 years, I never heard the word parliamentarian. Never. And you won't hear it again. It's just an excuse. We don't have a parliamentary system. It's such a ridiculous excuse. So we've got to do more. And then lastly, Brian, on the good things that he did, that 15% that I always give him credit for. Like here's another example. He put a minimum tax of 15% on the wealth on corporations, not corporations, on the wealthy. Okay, and so that's really good. But now it turns out it's because the OECD forced America to do it, right? So we didn't really have too much of a choice. But hey, I'll take it. I'll take it, right?
yeah,
And so that's way better than the Republicans, and I gave Biden a lot of credit for that. But even on that stuff, their messaging is so awful. And again, why have such terrible messaging? Like if I did 15% minimum tax on the rich, I'd go do 12 press conferences on it, right? And I'd talk. And if I did student debt relief, I did the things that he did, and I did an infrastructure bill, I'd be. If I had the record low unemployment he had, I would go out there and be like, "All right, guys, we broke another record today. We broke another record today. Our unemployment is better than France, better than Holland, better than
totally.
you know,
And that's something by the way that Democrats should have learned from Donald Trump the first time. I mean, we should have learned it about with the failures of Obamacare. You have something like Obamacare, which has now afforded 50 million Americans the ability to have coverage, and that was killed by Republicans in messaging. I mean, that was where they came forward and said that death panels were going to decide whether you lived or died. So that should have been the first indication as to what happens when you create a vacuum in this media environment. But then watching Donald Trump, the guy couldn't take a shit without trying to throw a parade on Pennsylvania Avenue for himself, and signed his name on the stimulus, or sent a letter along with those stimulus checks that everybody knew that it was his. Democrats didn't do that immediately following Trump having done that with. I believe Trump used the CARES Act, and then Democrats used the American Rescue Plan. And so often Democrats don't learn their lesson with regard to taking credit for what wins they are able to pass. And I think that there's no excuse for that in a media environment where you need to make sure that you get credit for every possible win that you can, especially in light of the fact that the Republican Party is led by somebody like Donald Trump, who's still out there beating his chest because he, quote unquote, built the wall along the southern border that amounts to like 50 miles of wall, and that's it. But you ask 99 out of 100 Republicans, and they will tell you that Donald Trump completely secured the southern border because they know how to beat their chests and take credit for wins even when they are non-existent.
Yeah, Brian, I couldn't agree more. And so what Trump does is good politics. You might hate it, but he's constantly draws attention to things that he did right. He often will draw attention to things that he didn't do right, and he'll just lie and say he did them right.
Or blame them on the Democrats that aren't in control.
Right, but when he says, even if it's a lie, which is very, very often, right? If he says that 10 times or 100 times, people think it's true, especially when the Democrats don't push back.
Correct.
And don't say it 10 times, 100 times. And there's something, look, I'm going to push your guys' limits here for those of you watching for what you're willing to tolerate from the left, okay, from your own, which is culturally, we have a problem. We have an NPR problem. We think we should always whisper. And we should be civil, and we should be polite. And so when I raise my voice, even in defense of the left, I almost always get pushback from Democrats who go, oh, you're doing it uncivilly. No, don't. Oh, what a braggart. How arrogant. How this, how that. No, guys, we're in the WWE era. We're not in the NPR era.
Yeah, so, I don't think you're going to get any pushback from my audience on that. In fact, I think the recurring theme that I've seen from my audience is that there is a desperation for the Democrats to actually learn how to fight back in this era where Republicans are showing that they are willing to do it. And then when Democrats defer to norms, when they defer to the institutions, when they defer to the fucking parliamentarian, I mean, people are tired of that shit. And we are not there to uphold the norms of the Senate, some unwritten rules of the Senate. We are there to ostensibly protect people in this country, enact our agenda, and actually get shit done, not just preserve the norms of the Senate that, by the way, are going to be upended the second that they become politically inconvenient for Republicans. Cenk, I wanted to finish off with this. You had alluded to this before, and there are a lot of these edge case examples of what Democrats should be doing. And I think the ACLU questionnaire, I mean, we obviously, there's been so much ink spilled about this idea of gender reassignment surgeries in prison. This was part of I believe an ACLU questionnaire, some edge case example, but Democrats often feel, I believe, like they have to go on record defending even the most obscure examples. Otherwise, they're going to be viewed as not sufficiently progressive. And so they do take these maximalist positions. And so moving forward, and by the way, that will serve the purpose, as we've seen now, of, okay, so you're on record taking this position and ostensibly to support a very marginalized subset of the population. But now it's become such a liability that you can't actually get in power to be able to help the people that you purport to want to help because you've come out and taken this position. And I think that, this is my question for you. Do you think that there has to be some acknowledgement by either the Democrats, who would be the ones that have to answer these questions, or the interest groups, the special interest groups who pose these questions about how, in fact, while you think you're trying to help, you're just giving ammo and fodder to the right to be able to attack you with, thereby ensuring that you're not actually in power to support those very people and those very special interest groups?
So I read really thoughtful pieces about how those interest groups are driving the party to extremes, and I get it, and I understand that phenomenon. I think it's right, but I don't think that's the heart of the problem, because an interest group can, and I've run for office, so they have asked me these questions. I answer them the way that I think is right, period, right? So, oh, well, then we won't support you. Okay, then God bless your heart, brother. Don't support me, okay? You've got to be able to at least have the courage to do that. So the politicians are the ultimate arbiters of whether you're going to sign on or not sign on to that. But I think the heart of the matter is not the politicians or the interest groups, it's the media. So now you see me pushing back against the maximalist positions on the left. And some people are under the misimpression that started after the election. No, I've been doing it for 2 years. I've been doing that battle for a long, long time, right? And you go ask the far left, and they'll tell you, yeah, no, we've been battling Cenk and Anna on this for years now. And so why? And when we do, Brian, you see what happens with your own eyes. Like the far left then swarms. How dare you? You're right winger. You're Nazi, fascist, racist. You're hurting trans people. You're leading to their suicide. You're hurting black bodies. So extreme. I mean, look, borderline lunatic talk. And if you're in the far left and you're like, how dare you? That's not lunatic. Guys, go ask a normal person that's not in politics. Okay? Go to a barbecue, go to wherever you go, okay, go to dim sum, whatever you do, right? And ask a normal person, do you think calling a woman will lead to trans people dying? And they'll say, what? What on God's green earth are you talking about? Like, they won't even understand the language you're using. It's so extreme, right? So it's incumbent upon us to fight back and go, I love you guys. It's not that you don't exist, and it's not that I hate your positions. You're still within the tent. And I got Young Turks hosts, TYT hosts, who are in that camp. And I'm not pushing them out. I'm not banning them. I'm not censoring them. I'm having conversations with them. You have to have the courage to draw the line against your own extremes. And if we don't do that, then everyone in America is going to think that we're all in agreement on the most extreme positions. I mean, I questioned defund the police from day one. I said, that is the worst slogan I've ever heard. And like, you guys are not explaining that you want to move some of the money to mental health. Besides which, when you went to go implement it in these liberal cities, you didn't move it into mental health. All you did was cut funding. And then where did this insane idea of turning felonies into misdemeanors come from? I don't know a single progressive host that fought for that. I didn't hear any interest groups. And then all of a sudden it's foisted on us. Yeah. And then we have to defend this extreme position that the voters in California and New York hate. And so, no, I don't defend that position. I never voted for it. I did get tricked into voting for Prop 47 because they literally didn't write it in the proposition in California. But we never had a discussion about it. We never came to a conclusion on it. So I know it's hard, especially as you see me and Anna get attacked so extremely from that wing of the party. It feels like, I don't want to deal with that, right? But if more people don't have the courage to say, I'm sorry, brothers and sisters, you're on our side, no disrespect, but I don't agree, then we're never going to get to be clear with the American voters that we don't all want to abolish prisons. I mean, that's just crazy. That's not where the Democratic voters are at all. And they proved it overwhelmingly in California. I mean, they recalled the progressive mayor 65-35 in Oakland. If Oakland isn't progressive enough for you, then you've lost the thread.
Yeah. Well, look, I think one thing is clear. I do absolutely agree with your philosophy of making sure that we have these conversations. And by the way, I understand that there might be some virtue in not having them in the months before the election and giving fodder to the right to be able to weaponize some of the stuff that's said against the Democrats. But it's December of 2024. You know, if we use this moment for anything, if this whole loss is going to be worth anything, it's having some introspection in the aftermath and figuring out what we can do to get better. Anybody who thinks that the Democrats or the left is perfect is not paying attention to this election cycle, not paying attention to this media environment. So I do think that there is a lot of virtue in having difficult conversations, speaking to everybody throughout the entire left of center space and spectrum, and figuring out what we can take. Some things people are going to want to adopt, and some things are not. But it's okay to have these conversations. We lose nothing by virtue of having them right now. So I do appreciate you taking the time. And one last thing, how can my viewers see more from you?
Thank you. So tyt.com, you can see our whole 24-hour network there. You could also check out the Populist plank sign on, so that has extra weight and that we could use as leverage with the politicians on both sides. But mainly, guys, I know we're on all the platforms, and you can watch us on Roku, Samsung. It's almost any platform. But Young Turks on YouTube 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern every day. Come watch the show live and see for yourself. Hey, do they make sense? Do they not make sense? And we're bringing in right-wingers, left-wingers, and every part of the political spectrum to have these important conversations we need to have. So Young Turks on YouTube, 6 p.m. Eastern every day.
Cenk, I appreciate you taking the time, and happy holidays.
Thank you so much, Brian. And I really appreciated this good, honest, thoughtful conversation.